NFL teams don't typically make a lot of news over their bye week, but the Denver Broncos, riding high off our first victory over the Kansas City Chiefs in 16 games, just got some quiet and stunning and perplexing and crazy great news. And I think it's going to be great news for all of Broncos country. If you're new to this channel, my name is Ben. I talk all things Denver sports and would love if you would like and subscribe. So what is this great news that the Broncos just got at their trade deadline? Well, that news is that after their embarrassing loss to the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football, the Las Vegas Raiders fired their GM and their head coach, Josh McDaniels. Now, it's easy to just laugh at that and think, oh, great news, the Raiders are in disarray, but there are some great implications for the Denver Broncos in that, and maybe some scary ones as well. So let's break down the bright side first. The bright side of this great deal is that currently the Las Vegas Raiders are having to pay not only Josh McDaniels, but still John Gruden. And so if you think that one of your biggest rivals in the AFC West already has to pay two highly paid coaches, the chances of this cash-strapped team actually making a deal for a blockbuster coach is pretty good. And knowing that any coach coming in there is just coming in with that mess, I think that's great news for the Broncos, who have to play this rival 2 years for infinity. For the next however many years we keep playing this sport of football, the Broncos have to play this team. So it's awesome that Josh McDaniels signed a 6-year deal. He still has 4 years of that deal that the Raiders are going to have to pay him for, and I believe the Raiders still have 2 years on the John Gruden deal. So anytime one of your biggest rivals is so tied up in that, that's a great thing. I also think for the immediate future, it's a great thing for the Broncos in that, as I've been counting our wins and losses as we still have to make this playoff push, we still have to go to Las Vegas, the last game of the season, and I couldn't help but count wins that I think we're going to have and just think, oh my goodness, we're going to have to beat Josh McDaniels in Las Vegas to make the playoffs. And I couldn't help but think how beautiful the story would be for Josh McDaniels and the Raiders if he stuck it to us. Well, it's kind of hard to stick it to us when you're playing Madden on your couch. And so I think it's great news because I think that is a nearly guaranteed win for the Broncos, the last game of the season. And if the playoffs really are coming down to that, that's fantastic for us, that we get to play a team without a coach, without an identity, who's clearly now on the tank mode because they need to move forward. So it is a little interesting because we know that in the NFL, coaches can have slow starts and bounce back and do pretty well. And I just think of living now in Michigan like I do. Dan Campbell didn't have the hottest start, and now the Detroit Lions are one of the hottest teams in football, and the Lions didn't move on from Dan Campbell when they certainly could have. So I'm very curious about that. I mean, the Raiders have made the playoffs under Josh McDaniels, and that's a big, huge win and a feather in their cap, so that's good. But I know the Raiders are a reeling team. They have not won a playoff game since 2002. So I know Broncos country, we were discouraged by that Chiefs record, but that's nothing compared to how bad the Raiders have been over the years, that they haven't even won a playoff game since before I was even done with high school. So that's pretty discouraging. But I think if you're looking at maybe what are the implications, again, of this long-term for the Broncos in the AFC West, it's really interesting to look at who are some of the head coaches that they think the Raiders might be able to land. Obviously, we know that Davis family is a lot to work with, and I think if there are a lot of head coaching vacancies, there's rumors that the Bears head coaching vacancy will open up. If the Chargers keep charging, I think the Chargers job opens up as well. And I think of all those jobs, the Raiders is probably the last one I would take. So some of the rumors of who they think that might step in and take this job or be offered this job would be Brian Flores, the Vikings defensive coordinator, who was with the Dolphins for a while. Dan Quinn, the Cowboys defensive coordinator, who the Broncos made a run at a bunch of years ago. Ejiro Evero, which I think would be an interesting name to have on there. He was with the Broncos as well. Ben Johnson is a highly acclaimed, they talk about him around here like he walks on water. He's a very brilliant offensive mind. Interestingly enough, Josh McDaniels was also a brilliant offensive mind. And then, of course, Jim Harbaugh. So I think if there are 3 or 4 head coaching vacancies, the Raiders are number 3 or 4 on there. And I think if I'm Harbaugh or Quinn or Ben Johnson, the Raiders is going to be the last one that I take, especially knowing that they are pretty cash strapped. But I think for the Broncos for this year, it's a great thing because that our last game of the season just got a lot easier. And I also, maybe it's just me drinking the Broncos Kool-Aid, but I always have kind of believed in Josh McDaniels. After that 6-0 start with the Denver Broncos, I still have my pair of striped brown socks from that era, and I always thought he was like crazy brilliant, and maybe it really was just Tom Brady in New England that made him so good. But I am kind of happy that the Raiders never saw success with him, because I think had they waited him out a little bit, had he been able to get a quarterback who was serviceable instead of Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe the Raiders would have been more formidable. I wish we would have beat him a couple more times when he was here. But alas, he's gone. Kind of crazy that mid-season firings are not a very common occurrence in the NFL, and he has now been fired mid-season twice. I remember the last time he was fired from us, he immediately went and started working for New England. So it'll also be interesting. Does Bill Belichick, who's been having some troubles there in New England, does Bill Belichick make a run at Josh McDaniels and get the whole party back together? Have Josh McDaniels come mentor Mac Jones, perhaps? But all that, very interesting to see what will happen with that. I can't wait to keep breaking that down. I have a great week of content for us, so make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the breaking Denver Broncos news. Until then, Broncos country, let's ride.